Hi, I'm Bridget Price.
And I'm Lauren Kemp.
And this is Entrepreneurs in Progress. Hashtag goals. For years, podcasting was a goal of mine. And thanks to a friend who came to me just 8 weeks ago about this idea and who loves to hit the ground running, we are officially in the game. And we have achieved yet another goal. So for today's episode, we'll be talking all about goals, some personal, but mostly entrepreneurial goals, and the significance of hitting those important milestones. So Lauren, we know we all have these aspirations and things that we want to achieve, but why do you think setting goals is important in the process of getting there?
Setting goals is important because it helps provide you direction and focus. So when you set a goal, it becomes easier to figure out how to get to that goal once it's defined. So Brian and I find goal setting to be very helpful in keeping us focused on what's important. The tactics and strategy may change, but as long as we have that North Star, that end goal, that helps us keeping on track and having a direction to move towards and provide some ongoing motivation as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that we learn how to achieve our aspirations through goal setting. You know, if you have something you want to achieve, you kind of mark out the steps or set up the steps that you need to take in order to accomplish that goal. And I think goal setting also helps us define who we are and what we ultimately want to be or who we want to become. Mm-hmm. And I think that in all aspects of life, we experience goal setting to some degree, whether that's finishing school. For me, I think an early goal for a lot of people is making sure that they graduate high school, and then others graduating college, perhaps pursuing a master's degree or higher education. And others are, making sure that they get married or move out of the city that they live in, pursue a specific job. I think we all have goals that we want to attain, and we try to work our way through that and do that in the best and I think most efficient way that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think it also provides some satisfaction, that feeling of, accomplishment and the satisfaction that comes with reaching and achieving that goal and that milestone. Mm-hmm. It gives your journey some more purpose when you're pursuing something.
Yep.
Whether that's, personal life or professional life.
Yeah, and I think that once we meet a specific goal, we get to now use that achievement or accomplishment as additional motivation to set another goal and reach that. And it continues to kind of line up these milestones, I guess, that we have established in life. I think we have predestined milestones that they're already set before we even really thought about. For example, finishing school, finding a significant other, getting married, and then settling down and having kids. It's like those are goals that arguably most people want to achieve. That has been challenged, I think, recently in terms of if that is for everybody or if that it's that linear type of approach. I think it's all over the place. People are getting married way later in life. People are choosing to approach parenthood differently. So I think that for the most part, goals give us a sense of direction, a sense of purpose. And then within those goals, whether we achieve them or we don't achieve them, we can figure out if we need to set new goals or pivot and move in a different direction.
I like how I was smiling because when you were talking about how people go about goals differently and how things are a little bit more challenged these days about those predestined goals for society and expectations. It just made me think of the time my grandparents told me and Brian, they're just jokingly you kids do everything backwards these days. We lived together and then we got a puppy together before we were engaged and married, and we bought a house before we were technically married. We were engaged at the time, but they were just different in my day. And I was it really is.
It is different. And I think it will continue to be different. And I feel like even with those predestined steps or goals that society has kind of put forth, we've just found different ways to make that happen without following this linear path. And it's crazy because I think taking this nonlinear approach is very similar to what entrepreneurs experience on their journey. It's jagged, it's not a straight line. You know, there's tons of ups and downs. And I think depending on how you take that predestined society, those goals, it reflects really on where you are in your life. And quite honestly, how much you value those goals. I would say probably in our parents' day and age, it made sense to follow this path, right? Because, you know, you wanted stability. You wanted to go after this American dream. You wanted to make sure you didn't have a family that experienced, you know, setbacks, maybe like their parents did, or, you know, their parents' generation or grandparents. So now, because we have been given the room to grow, I think we can challenge those goals. And our parents, because they did follow this specific path, ultimately gave us room to redefine those goals. And I think that's always a good thing. I think it's healthy to redefine goals, even if they've been around forever.
Absolutely. Everyone's goals are going to be different. Like, you pursue what you want in the manner in which you want. We are really fortunate in our, you know, this day and age for all the progress that women have made, that we can, you know, pursue entrepreneurship and feel like we do have more choices. Like, we don't have to have kids. We don't have to, you know, do what society says, as more and more people have been challenging that. And, you know, I feel like it is so much harder back in, you know, our parents' day or grandparents' day. Like, that's just what was the norm. That was what is accepted. And it has taken like so many people before us to challenge those norms, to challenge, you know, that way of thinking, and to openly do it and inspire others so they don't feel like they have to follow the same path. So it's a really, you know, good time for things like that, for not having to stick to what society normally tells you, I guess. At least in America, like, I'm not going to say like it's the same everywhere, but where we are more likely to be able to do stuff like that.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. And I see it happening in future generations too, you know, depending on some of the changes that we plan to make as a society as a whole, and for the betterment of equality and progression for equity. I think it'll give people more room to really define goals for themselves and not feel beholden to some archaic, you know, norms that really don't apply anymore. So Lauren, how do you go about setting goals for yourself, whether it's personal or professional?
I laugh because I'm so bad at this. Like, I was so bad at this in high school. My dad, like, literally had me write down my senior year what my goals were, because I think he was maybe worried I didn't have the direction and focus, or it was like a skill he was trying to instill in me. And he was like, oh man, she's a senior, she's going off to college, and I don't know if she knows how to do this. I don't even remember what I wrote down, because I was like, I don't care about goal setting. But now I do think it's more important. Like, for me, I like to set personal goals. I think, again, like I said, it helps with that feeling of accomplishment, of purpose, of satisfaction, of just, you know, giving more meaning to life. So setting personal goals, you know, I usually do it based on different areas of my life. I don't usually write it down. For our business goals, Brian and I have done like a Google Doc at the beginning of the year, and we try and like reflect on what happened the previous year, and then we'll write down our goals for the, you know, the coming year. But we don't revisit them that much, and that's something that we definitely could be better at. Like, I have kind of looked into like software for like keeping track of goals and just goal setting, and I feel like those are very helpful for larger teams as the goals get more varied, complex, and there are just more of them. But for our small business, you know, we kind of like write them down, and our North Star is the, you know, the revenue goals, and then we don't do as good a job of tracking and setting the smaller goals because it shifts so often for us. Yeah. So yeah, we're not great at goal setting, but we realize the importance of it.
Yeah, like you, I was thinking about this topic as we were planning this episode, and I was actually dumbfounded, like, oh, how do I actually really go about setting goals for myself, for the business, and I think I've always been terrible at setting goals. I've been able to follow these, like I said, these predestined goals: graduate, go to college, graduate college, get a job. So I've been able to achieve those things, and even within that, I've been able to pursue personal goals that I've had. I wanted to pursue publishing or writing, so I was able to do that. I wanted to work in PR agency life. I did that. I, have been able to meet certain goals and accomplishments. And it definitely was not a straight line. There was a lot of, just weaving in and out. And it took a while for me to meet my goal. But I can't say that I recall like just writing something down and saying, this is what I want to do. It was always in my head.
Yeah.
All of my goals have always lived in my head. And sometimes I would express them verbally amongst friends or family and say, this is what I'm going to do. But I didn't always draft a plan on how to get there. I think it's different for people in different circumstances. For example, if you want to be a doctor, you have to go to medical school, residency, and then, choose ultimately your practice. And you can plot and plan what schools you're interested in, who you're going to talk to, where you're going to apply, and how you're going to take the MCAT and all of those things. With everything else, sometimes it looks kind of fuzzy. In college, because I did have a goal of being in PR, I interned like crazy in my junior and senior year. So I had like 4 internships at any given time. I was trying to build up that experience, and I wanted to meet this specific goal.
Yeah.
And I did, but I think I was so focused on the goal, I didn't realize that maybe this wasn't a fit for me anymore. Or maybe sometimes I got caught up in chasing the actual, saying I met this goal versus actually enjoying the fact that I was on this journey and trying to meet this particular milestone. For me, yeah, I can't say I've been the best at goal setting in terms of actually tracking it. I've done goals within in the corporate world. We did SMART goals. Those who are familiar with SMART goals or not familiar with SMART goals, it's an acronym. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And you have to kind of build out smaller goals within these kind of quadrants to make sure you reach your overarching goal. Very intense, but they actually are really effective. SMART goals work, but it takes a lot of work. And I, in my mind, I'm like, I already have to figure out all the other stuff. I didn't want to have to figure out just documenting and getting all the micro steps in there, but it does help you really stay on track. But I think tracking the progress of your goal is where a lot of people fall short. I think we say we want to do this, like I mentioned, for years, I wanted to start a podcast, but I never tracked how I would do it or, where I would start and that type of thing. Again, just living in my head, living in my own world. And I think that's why even when we talk about this topic, I'm, really questioning the strength or my ability to goal set now. So interesting.
Well, I think for entrepreneurs, when you're a new business, the only goal, at least in our minds, that mattered was revenue, because we can't keep doing this if we're not making money. And when you're so new, you're just trying to figure that out. How can I make revenue and profit and keep this going? I feel like if we had made a bunch of SMART goals, those just change so much because we are learning what is working, what isn't. And I think that you definitely, at least the way we currently do it now, we have our large goal driven by revenue. That is our direction, our focus. It's how do we get to, this revenue number? And then we kind of do it on the super micro end where every week we have, the main priority and, goals for that week, which are in service to the main larger goal. But sometimes, priorities shift and change. Like, for example, for Q1, our goal was to release a product by the end of Q1, and we have like 1 week left right now, and that's not going to happen. But instead, we ended up launching like a portal for our clients, and like that's something that we hadn't even considered at the beginning of the year, and that ended up taking up more time. Or we're working on our processes more than we thought and documenting more stuff. So sometimes it changes with whatever the need is at the moment, and that can be good and bad because sometimes you end up just getting pulled in so many different directions and you end up not finishing anything. So that's something that we definitely are worried about. But I think that when you're a new business, it's kind of hard to set goals. It's like, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 3-year plan? It's like, I don't know what our 1-year plan is. Like, we're just trying to make it through the next 6 months and plans change. Like, how often do we set plans and goals in life? And you're just like, well, this completely is different than what I had initially set out to do.
Yeah. And I think that's why when, again, truly critically thinking about this topic, I'm like, it's hard to really set those defined goals because you're right. Things shift, things change, priorities shift. You have to put out fires, and it challenges your approach on how to get there. You have to kind of weave in and out. You have to dodge things. Sometimes your overall goal of this revenue marker doesn't change, right? But now you might have to push out the product offering that you had set out to push out in the end of Q1. That happens all the time. For me, sometimes the week to week looks so different. Like, okay, I just want to make sure there's no cancellations for the week, right? Or I just want to make sure that our teams are where they need to be at any given moment. That's my goal. And it's funny because I think sometimes when we do those smaller or shorter term goals, they really help us hone in on a solution for a bigger problem. If I take this 1 week and I can properly schedule out our cleaning teams and make sure everyone is where they need to be, this now helps set the bar for what I need to do moving forward. And I need to automate this somehow or apply it, week over week. And this would be the new bar, and I can use that to guide me in making these changes. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think certain things require our attention at any given time, and we have to focus on it, or sometimes they almost hold us captive. Like we can't not focus on these fires or these issues that are time sensitive. So yeah, I think that we have to be forgiving with goal setting and figuring out what that number, what that metric looks like. I know you mentioned for Q1, you guys wanted to offer this product offering by the end of Q1. So what were your first goals starting out in your business?
Sure. So starting out for Brian, so when he started it before I had even joined, he was working as a contractor with another partner. His goal was to bring in his own leads and start being less dependent upon that partner so he could go off and do his own thing. So that's kind of how Rotive started evolving. When I joined, the main goal was, can we make enough money to cover our cost of living? And so I wouldn't have to look for another job. So Brian wouldn't have to look for another job. I'm like, as long as we're I don't care if we don't make more money. As long as we're not, burning through our savings, we're able to just maintain cost of living. That was the main goal for me, was just let's just survive. Let's just get through year one and not have to look for another job so soon.
Right.
And then, still figure out, how to get leads, still become less reliant upon, the partner. So getting our first, Rotive client that wasn't through another partner, that was, a big goal. And I feel like just sales dominated most of our goals in the beginning, is because you're just trying to figure out, how can we be profitable? How can we keep going? How long can we stay in the game? And then, once you actually start doing well, it's like, oh, okay, that opens up so many more possibilities. But in the very beginning, I'm just like, how can we make this work?
Do you recall your initial goals when you were starting Cozy Cactus?
I guess it was a little different because there wasn't as much like expectation to have it be immediately profitable and that it would like support our cost of living. I think like, you know, the first goal was to put out a version of the product that I was proud of and that like, you know, have the website built, have the R&D process done, have the product like just ready to go. That was a big goal because, you know, if you don't have that product in a product business, you don't really have much to sell.
Right.
And then after that, you know, the goal is trying to grow an audience and then, you know, eventually it's become profitable. So definitely different goals for that business than for Rotive, because that's one where I'm like, okay, this is going to definitely take a lot longer. I do not expect this to, you know, be immediately successful and taking off. I mean, that's what I was like hoping, you know, that's always the hope, immediately successful, but learn that product-based business versus services-based business, very different expectations for those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our next, ideally, business will be a software-based business after co-host. But no, I totally agree with you. Product offerings versus service-based offerings, two different sides of a coin, right? And the goals are always going to look a little bit different. I'm going to say for me, when I first pursued business or entrepreneurship, it was to be rich. That was my goal. My goal was to be rich. And, you know, again, I expected the millions to be pouring in like after the first hour of being live, or, you know, but no, that's always been our goal, was to be rich. Now it's funny because in my 20s, I didn't really have an idea of what rich was, right? I thought I did. I thought easily like, oh, if I hit $1 million, I'm rich. Or if I make this, that means I'm rich. And it looks a lot different for me now than, you know, when I was in my 20s. I want to still be rich. Still my goal. However, I feel like me wanting to be rich is a moving target. So I don't have to meet some weird arbitrary number to define myself as rich. For me, that is now making sure all of my expenses are covered. I can easily contribute to my savings account and my retirement, and I'm good. Right? I can help people when I need to help. And I'm free to do whatever I'd like to do or what I'm comfortable doing. And I don't have to worry about going back to work or pursuing other streams of income through that traditional work model. Also now a goal of mine is to continue to kind of embark on this serial entrepreneurial lifestyle. I have all these ideas in my head that we mentioned a few episodes back. And I want to be able to have the space to, you know, start those and see those through. And now I have more confidence than I ever did before after having a business that's actually working and having revenue and having money put in our accounts, which is really nice, is a constant kind of motivator to keep going.
I like how you brought up the big picture goals, because I definitely like went right immediately into like the specific, because like when I think about big picture goals for entrepreneurs, it's, you know, being your own boss, it's having flexibility in your life. Like for us, it's working remote, and eventually like we want to be able to travel more and be able to work from different places. So, you know, and not have to go back to the corporate world. So, you know, become rich. And like you said, rich means different things. Like it's covering expenses, it's putting money away towards savings, it's potentially allowing yourself to invest in other ideas that you want to pursue. So I think it's good that you took the more big picture view. That reminds me so much of Brian. You guys are the big picture people, and I'm like, here we are in the weeds, like specific.
No, I have my Z. From my A to Z, I already have my Z plotted out, and that's just to be rich and on the beach reading books with wine or something. That's what I want to do. But yeah, I mean, we did have a chance when I stopped working at my last job. We went to Hawaii before everything shut down, and we were working from there. And it's like, that was way better than, you know, working in an office in a space on my own thing that I could grow for my household And that just hit a little different.
So I do want to get into some more specifics, like what were Made Easy's goals, starting out?
Oh man. Well, Marcus could probably tell you a bit more about those initial goals. If I can recall correctly, he definitely wanted to develop a business that would replace his main source of income, which was his work income. And then he also wanted to make sure he got it to a place where it was automated enough to where it was just passive income, and then he can leverage those earnings to start a new business and continue on with building streams of revenue. That looked different in the beginning. For Marcus, he wanted to make sure that this is the first business that was profitable. Mm-hmm. He's had businesses and things that made money, but in terms of profitable, I think that's a whole different conversation. So he wanted to make sure that this was profitable. So we started small. When we got our first month, we did like $1,300, and that was like, oh, this is working.
Yeah.
This is cool. That was great. Then it started going up and up from there. We had our first $5,000 month in the month that we got married. Oh. And that was, that was like 4 months later. And then our next goal was 10,000. So we hit that 3 months later. Mm-hmm. And then the next goal from there was 20,000. And so we kind of jumped. We didn't get to 20,000 until I believe the following year. And then we kind of dipped, went back down like 18, 15, and then we hit 20 again in our second, technically 2.5 years. And it's funny because every time we met those goals, we thought it would feel bigger than it did. And sometimes we were able to celebrate like these wins. We finally made it to 10,000. Oh my gosh, we jumped to 20. But then when we see these dips, we're like, how do we keep pushing the needle up? Mm-hmm. The kind of best analogy I can give whenever you are meeting these kind of goals in terms of revenue or numbers is sometimes within business, if you hit this 10,000 mark and then you go up to 20,000 and then the next goal is 30,000, you have to elevate your game at each mark. And what you're doing at 10,000 is different than what you're doing at 30,000 because it has to be. It's such a significant amount of money that to do that monthly, you have to make sure you're constantly evolving your business. So I love that you touched earlier on how priority shift or goals change, because as you meet certain smaller goals or internal goals, it forces you to change kind of your overall picture. And, to that end, we were so focused on these markers hitting 10, 20, 30,000 that we weren't paying close attention to our margins. Mm. And, we're seeing all this money kind of in QuickBooks, in our system and everything. We're like, okay, what's it looking like now in terms of what we bring home? And again, we didn't pay ourselves till last year, mm-hmm. but we were making sure, like, how come we are cutting it so close to payroll every time? Like when it's time to do payroll for our cleaning teams, why is it cutting it so close? And at first we told ourselves, oh, it's the delay from payments, right? We have to wait for our processor to put the money in our account and that type of thing. But okay, it has to be more than that, because if we're doing these numbers, why are we cutting it so close? Mm-hmm. So we had to do a deep dive into our margins, and they weren't the best. Thankfully, they weren't negative, right? Yeah. We weren't, in the red or anything, but they were concerning enough for us to say, okay, we need to take a step back. And does it matter that we hit $30,000 a month if our margins are at 5%? That doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. I'd rather do 20,000 a month and make sure our margins are at 25%, because now we can add to our profit. So mm-hmm. yeah, I think that as business owners, you have to make sure you're not myopic, and you have to make sure you aren't driven by these vanity metrics, right? Because they clearly sometimes can be viewed as a vanity metric. Some people are like, oh my gosh, you're doing 20,000 or 30,000 a month. Like, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. But are we actually really making any money?
Yeah, I totally relate to your story about payroll, because it's like you can be making $20,000, $30,000 and you can still be like, oh shit, like, I don't know if I have enough for payroll this month. I have to move stuff from our savings over. And there are times where I'm like looking at our bank account. I'm like, oh my God, we only have like $6,000 like, and payroll's coming up.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, and
Girl,
people like,
listen, moving around, the shifting, like, okay, let me move this money over here, this over here.
So, like,
and then once these payments hit, I'm gonna move my money back over here.
Right. And I know we're going to talk about this more in like our finances podcast, because there's so much to cover there. But yeah, like the idea that we are like, you can be bringing in that much money, but you know, it's going to operating expenses, it's going to payroll, it's going to taxes, it's going to reinvesting back into the business. Like what you actually take home feels so small sometimes.
Absolutely. Oh man, girl, we were digging into those margins and we're looking at all the costs. And we have our numbers laid out in the spreadsheet. We revisit them, right? But when you're really now assessing like, okay, this is getting frustrating. How come I'm having to move things around, or how come I'm nervous when payroll hits? What's going on? And when you really look at all the costs, you're like, holy crap, we have to either figure out a way to continuously grow, cut back on expenses, or optimize whatever we have going on. And I think for a lot of new entrepreneurs, I think this is that breaking point for a lot of them. They have to get to a space where you are growing exponentially, but you're in that weird space where it's still not enough to deal with your burn rate, right? It's still not enough to cover that. And that is very disorienting when you're seeing these large numbers pull in. Yeah. And it seems like the math isn't adding up.
Crunching the numbers, like,
we'll definitely get into that. Yeah. You're reevaluating everything. Like, why did I do this? This is so stupid. Like, you know.
So Brian and I actually set 3 revenue goals. And by Brian and I mean me. Like Brian has his goal, and Brian is always the more optimistic, pie in the sky, like always sets, not always, I believe sometimes he sets goals that are a little too high, and then he's more often disappointed because he just has such a high standard that he reaches for. And so for me, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this business has 3 revenue goals. So what is the minimum to keep our employee and to keep a comfortable, you know, cost of living? And then I have like my goal where it's like, you know, cautiously optimistic. And then there's Brian who has like the 3rd goal of pie in the sky. So like, so for example, for this year, I think our minimum to keep everything just rolling with what we've got going now is $20K a month. So that's 240,000 a year. And my goal is, you know, let's make 30K a month. I would be happy. I'd be like, I feel like that's a good goal. Brian's is $500,000, which is like 42,000 a month. And I'm just like, I don't know how the hell we're going to get there, because it's like you said, once you reach a certain milestone, you have to evolve if you want to get to the next big milestone. Like, what we're doing currently is not going to be enough to get to that, to his goal. We need to figure out different tactics and ways to grow that monthly revenue to reach that goal. And then, of course, you have up months and down months. So it's,
right. It's not consistent, right? So if your goal is 20,000 a month, you might have a month that's 18,000. You might have a month that's 22 or 23. And then, you know, that's what we were experiencing. As soon as we hit 10,000, for example, in 2018 a month, and our next month, it was 7,000, because the summer months are really slow. Traditionally in cleaning, people are on vacation, people are out and about. And so it's a weird feeling to see that you hit this number and then you're instantly below that goal again. But yeah, I do think that, to your point, you have to make sure you're cognizant of what these goals are and what the minimum is and then what the max is. And more so than not, what you're doing at the minimum is not enough to take you to the max level. It's like an athlete, right? You can be the best athlete in your high school, but then there are 200 high schools in your state. Then you have to compete at this college level, which these are the best of the best. in all 50 states around the country. Then you get to the pros, and those are the best of the best. And it's like, man, you got to take that up a notch. And it's tough. It's really hard. And I think entrepreneurs, we have to keep that in mind. We can't, as we're setting these goals, we really have to evaluate and assess what's required of me to get there, and what's required of our company to achieve these goals. So oftentimes we have these, these lofty ideas, and we don't really define exactly how it's going to happen. We just think the money's going to come in. Like,
well, we're not even sure how we're going to get to that 500,000 goal for this year. Like we have some ideas, like, if we get more recurring, clients, on a, subscription, that's a way. If we release a product, that could be a possible way to expand beyond. If we get our employee fully ramped and more independent and able to the more that he can take on, the more that Brian can do other things, either sales or like work on anything. It's figuring out what are these like Lego pieces or Tetris pieces, how are they all going to fit together to build up to that number? Because just doing what we've been doing is not going to get us there. So how do we make that jump?
Yeah. So what does your goals look like now as you're trying to get there, even for your goals, and then what Brian's goals are, and then potentially what's in the middle?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing for us that we're trying to figure out is how do we scale? So what we've been doing currently has been good enough, and we are, able to bring in enough revenue to cover our costs, to have a little profit, to keep going, to pay for our employee. But that's not going to, what we're doing is not going to scale. So our biggest thing is, if we're going to reach that number, we got to figure out how we can scale. And the way you do that is you have clearly defined processes and repeatable processes that you can teach others so they can take on that, work while you try pursuing other ways of getting that, revenue. So
yeah,
the processes is a big one to scale. If we're able to launch the, product, we're still trying to figure out different ways to bring in our own leads. So like the more lead management, like that's another thing. Like if we put out video tutorials, if we have our website, SEO optimized, those kind of things. So there's so many different things. We're not sure which ones, it might be more than one, are going to work to get us to that number. But we know that we need to do something to scale.
Scaling is a huge one. We're constantly working on scaling. Right now, in our private conversations, I've mentioned we're just flying by the seat of our pants right now. We're growing at such a crazy rate.
That's awesome.
It's hard to scale. It is awesome. It's a great problem, but it's hard to scale, right? We're trying to incorporate processes and procedures and policies that are automated, that are teachable and repeatable. And it's like we come up with a new problem every day almost that we have to make sure we bake into the process. And so I can say that for the processes, and Marcus did a lot of the hauling of all of our processes. I mean, he's really great at developing these processes and procedures. That is literally what has gotten us here now. We, are growing so fast and have been able to keep up, I should say. I wouldn't say we're ahead. We've been able to keep up because of our existing processes and procedures. And our growth that we're experiencing now could not have been done if it wasn't for those processes that were already in place. So yeah, I think that scaling one is huge for a lot of companies. Super happy to have the growth, but then you're trying to make sure you quickly implement things to continue to sustain that growth and not lose it. Because that growth can also bottom you out if you're not careful.
Isn't that kind of an exciting that like our goals right now are scaling versus surviving? Like,
actually, that is exciting. And I am glad you brought that up because, again, we get so caught up in what we're trying to do that we forget that we're in this whole different space now in our business, right? It's no longer, as of the last year or so, we haven't had to completely worry about our payroll. Like, oh my God, where's the money coming? That has been like just a relief. Like we run payroll. Okay, it is what it is. We always look at the numbers, but we're not stressing about moving money around or anything like that. And now we're in this space where we are more than surviving, we're almost thriving, and we're trying to continue to elevate our game. And that is a really nice space to be in, because now we can really kind of dig our heels in. And what we do now in this next, I believe, 12 to 18 months really dictates how this business is going to turn out and what we're going to get from it in return.
Mm-hmm. Exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. What do you think, Lauren, are some of the major milestones? You kind of touched on it within our businesses respectively, but what do you think are some of the major milestones for entrepreneurs that they often consider, whether it's within your industry or outside of the software industry?
So Brian kind of talked about the idea of external milestones versus internal milestones. So external milestones being the impact that you actually have on the world, what value have you actually provided, and then internal ones are, things like getting your LLC, writing down your processes, things that are important and big milestones, but they don't necessarily contribute to like actually providing value for clients or customers. So I think that, at least some of the major milestones for us was, not being dependent on other partners. So getting our own leads, our first, road of only client, like that first sale, that first customer is always a big, milestone for new entrepreneurs. Like that's exciting. Sales is hard. Getting your first sale, so awesome. Great feeling.
Yes, it is.
There's always the revenue milestones, which are external as they are indicative of like people are paying you to provide value in a service, and you have provided that, which is why you got paid. So, I think for us, like when we started consistently hitting 10K, that was like a good feeling. Like, okay, like that's nice and consistent. And then I think after that, you start thinking it, in terms of 10K after that. So 20K, 30K, 40K. And for us, it's like, because it goes up and down, it's like, when have we hit a certain milestone and like have kept it for 3 months, like that's when it feels more consistent.
Right.
So yeah. And then of course, hiring your first employee, hiring your second employee, like hiring any employee feels like a good milestone. Oh, one that I like that can, it depends on how you define external versus internal, but a milestone for me that I was super happy about was we provided health benefits. So
yay,
mostly granted, we're 2/3 of the company, so we are getting that benefit. But health insurance is stupid expensive, so it was really nice to actually have a plan for our little team of 3, and to provide it for our employee. Like we weren't able to provide health insurance for our employee for their first 3 months of working with us, but since the beginning of this year, we have been able to do that. So that's a milestone that I didn't think about that I really like. But yeah, the revenue milestones are the main ones for us though, because that's our North Star. That's our main goal. Every time we hit some revenue markers, it makes us feel pretty happy because of our industry. Like we don't have as much overhead costs. Like our costs are relatively low, so our margins are pretty good. So that's not something that we've had to really zero in and focus in on as much. Like I do keep track of what our monthly costs are, and if I feel like there's a software or something that is not benefiting us enough, I'll cut it. So I definitely try to optimize our finances, but it's not as top of mind, I guess, for us.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
So yeah, those are some. Are there any milestones that come to mind for you?
Yeah, I think for me, when I first was starting out, it was always it's funny how I now think about revenue monthly. Before it was about how much I wanted to make a year. And it's funny, I think that's probably that weird corporate mindset, like I want to make this a year type of thing. But now we break it down monthly. We still have a revenue marker for our business, which is right now $1 million a year consistently. And that monthly amount is 83,333. Marcus has drilled that into my head over and over and over again, but I would say that initially starting out, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are looking to maybe transition from their side hustle to a main hustle, or grow their side hustle to a main business. Some want to make sure that they can focus only on that, and that's what they retire from. And then they want to earn consistent profit. That's where I'm at. I'm for the revenue, but I'm totally okay. Well, not totally. I'm more so okay with if we are like 50, 60,000 a month and we are getting great returns on our margins. I'm for that versus growing ridiculously fast and getting to that $1 million mark and our margins are a little shitty.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I think that we want to feel like we're getting something from our business of all the work and sweat and tears and effort we put into it. We want to make sure we get something out of it. So I also want to make sure we have a reduction in burn rate, like making sure what we put out is less than what we bring in. That was really shaky in the beginning, and that's hard for a lot of companies and businesses because I think entrepreneurs start out with very little and they don't have a lot of capital or access to capital. They're trying to find a way and they're having to dip into their savings or they're having to work multiple jobs just to feed this business. And, you know, if that goes on too long, it can be very unmotivating and discouraging. So just making sure that, you know, we don't go back to that, because that was really like our first year or so, which makes sense. You're trying to grow a business. You're trying to make sure you have everything that you need in place. For us too, you know, we have our first employee now as well. We, in our cleaning business, we worked primarily with contractors, and now we're transitioning to employees. That goal was set out in 2020, but we couldn't meet that goal because of COVID. We wanted to make sure, you know, the dust settled. We didn't know what the unknowns were, so we just did not think it was a good idea to launch in something like a transition to employees in such a weird time. But we have our first employee who started this week, so we are super excited. She was a contractor and we converted her to an employee. She also is getting health benefits, so that's super
awesome.
exciting. Yeah, so yeah, I think that those types of goals like reinforce that we're doing something right, that we're on the right path. We are still making a lot of mistakes, but we're growing and learning from them. And we're able to really kind of, because we've met certain milestones already, we're ready to kind of take it up a notch and establish some new goals.
Yeah.
Marcus is one who doesn't goal set at all. He kind of just, he has a end point, but he does whatever is necessary to get there. You know, doesn't necessarily map out things. So I think there are people out there like him who aren't really into goal setting per se. They're just more into actionable items and steps and just kind of focusing in on that. Have you ever experienced a situation where goal setting ultimately distracted you or prevented you from actually, you know, taking the steps necessary to pursue your goals?
Not really. I think I sometimes fall on the, you know, not goal setting side, where it's kind of like Marcus, where you just, you kind of just like have it in your head. Like, I don't think you necessarily need a goal to know the direction that you want to go in. Like, I think goals can help people who have, you know, some trouble staying focused in one area or have trouble like following through on certain things. And when you end up like getting spread over a bunch of different things. So I haven't found goals that like hinder me in like my steps to achieving them. I think that if anything, they provide direction. I think like it's when you talk about like the smaller goals, the tactics, those don't hinder, but they change. They don't like, I don't write down all of the strategies and smaller goals in pursuit of the bigger goal. Like, I think it's good to have the big goal, the main goal, and then, you know, how you get there evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I even after this conversation, I want to get better about goal setting, but I don't think that's never really been my style. You know, I've kind of just had whatever's in my head ruminating, and then I go and pursue it or try to take the steps necessary to embark on that.
I do think it's going to be different if we, you know, start growing our teams and having more employees. You're going to need like, it's part of goal setting is also accountability. So if it's just like, you know, me and Brian and we have a small team, like, you know, everything kind of falls on us anyway. And so, or like you and Marcus. So it's like, you know, it doesn't matter as much what goal you write down, because the outcome is from what we put into it. But when you start having larger teams, the goals do get more complex, and you do need to hold people accountable. So
absolutely. And that's a great point. I think in larger organizations, those goals and goal setting, it's really important because you need all of these departments or different groups or teams to come together to achieve a bigger goal. And you parse those out, those responsibilities, hold those people accountable to achieving what they need to do on their end. And then that helps you achieve this huge milestone or goal. And you can't do it without that type of environment. So I think that's a great point. I think when you're bootstrapping or you're kind of lean like we are, we wear so many different hats that we literally just get in and do.
Yeah.
And then we look back to see where we are. So that's a really great point.
Yeah.
So with that being said, are there any current milestones you'd like to share with our listeners or?
Sure. In the effort of being transparent. So we had our first 100,000 quarter. So
yay!
We're like, oh, that's
awesome.
Super exciting. And I feel comfortable sharing that number here because Brian and I are talking about it because we've been trying to figure out how do you share milestones like this without coming off as douchey or braggy. I'm so torn. When you hit a million in revenue, that's so awesome. These are things that should be celebrated. But then when you actually think about sharing it with people, you either come off as those, entrepreneurs who are just bragging about how much money they're making, but not sharing the full story. But then there's also people have certain hangups about finances and money in general.
Right.
They're afraid to tell you because they're worried about them making too much money or not enough money or how you're going to react, the judgment. So I feel comfortable talking about that with you and Marcus and our parents. And there's a small group of people where we do have that honest relationship. And I actually kind of I tested out sharing this with some friends who we've been friends for years with, but we don't always talk about these kinds of numbers. And so I was okay, I'm going to share it. And so yes, it's wonderful. We have 100K quarter. I was, crunching the numbers. I'm yeah, but we only really see 18% of that. We're only paying ourselves $18,000 over 3 months
$1,000 of that
for the two of us. So, I'm trying to share it in a way that tells the full story. And that's downplaying it a bit too, because obviously we own the business, even though over 60% goes to operations and taxes,
right?
A lot of it's getting reinvested back in this business that we own and it's business savings, but it still doesn't feel like our money. But anyways,
yeah,
it is so hard to try and share these numbers without coming off braggy. But I do want to celebrate that we did have our first 100,000 quarter.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we really have to push back on that because I hear you 100% about not wanting to come off this kind of arrogant or braggadocious type of demeanor about money. Because I think the reality is when we distill it down, people do have hangups about money and sharing that information. That's always been private. It's almost as private as who you vote for type of thing, However, it's huge. I mean, I know you said $500,000 is Brian's goal, but having your first $100,000 quarter puts you really at that precipice of meeting.
Yeah,
that
we're not too far off, and I thought that was an insane goal.
Yeah,
so
no, yeah, and again, it allows you to kind of reevaluate things in this next quarter. How do we make sure we get another $100,000 quarter goal or 125,000 or whatever the case may be, whatever that marker might increase to. I do think it's important to share that because we share promotions, we share job changes, we share all kinds of things as it pertains to this corporate world or structure entity. Why can't we share our entrepreneurial successes? And I think we have to move that needle a bit. When we first hit $30,000 a month last year, we shared it, and we had a family member reach out and say, I'm so happy for you guys, but you want to be careful sharing this information because not everyone's going to celebrate with you. And they're older. Yeah. So they have more of an old school mentality around sharing money and that type of information. But it was huge for us because, we're growing and hitting goals that we set for ourselves. And I've gotten positive responses out of sharing that type of information. People have come out and say, "Oh my gosh, like I have this business. Can you help me figure this out?" or whatever. And I just think you do more good than harm when you do share that type of information, because it's encouraging and it's motivating and people see it's possible. Quite honestly, for those who have a problem with it, they're not for you anyways.
But I think people just don't understand the full story either. Like,
absolutely,
it's so easy to share a metric, and like it's a vanity metric for sure, because like you said, there's so many other things that go into it. Margins, like the fact that you guys didn't pay yourself for 3 years, like the fact that we only really see, like we're still paying ourselves, like not the salary we want.
Yeah.
Like so much of it,
right?
It doesn't even feel like our own, because it feels like it's the business's, which again, we own. And like, blah blah blah.
But it's different. It's like that money is not going into your pocket. Like, it's out there in the abyss.
That's why it feels like we've kind of made it, but we haven't made it. Like, you said, we're in between surviving and thriving. Like we're in that sweet spot. We're
in this weird space. Like, it's like I can pay my bills, but like I still don't feel comfortable like just yanking out my money, even though it's my money.
And these are big numbers too.
It's like, Yeah. So. Absolutely. No, I agree. And I think that as long as it's always, and I always say you don't have to share the good, bad, and the ugly all in one fell swoop. You can share the good, and then later you can share some of the struggles. And, for me, I think it's important to be transparent and honest. I always keep it real. I'm like, listen, we're pulling in this, but it is not what it looks like. I always point to the car I'm driving, or all, a number of things, like just like, it's not, we're not, again, rolling in the dough over here. We're working towards something. We're building an asset, and we're trying to, establish our futures essentially. But yeah, it's definitely not all that it seems. And I think it's important for people to recognize that and know that too. I definitely want to err on the side of downplaying your accomplishments so much, because like you don't want to have to explain yourself like, oh, we're only bringing home 18% of that, because it feels like you're doing that it can feel like you're doing that to make someone else feel better about this accomplishment that you guys have worked so hard to achieve. So
that's part of it.
It's hard.
But it's trying to strike that balance of what is the reality, what is more of the story. So yeah, when I tested it out, sharing it, I was just like, I didn't feel like I did bad. And Brian did say you downplayed that. And I'm like, I would rather err on the side of downplaying it than over exaggerating something, like coming off as if we're doing better than what we actually are.
It's hard because when people talk, they're like, oh, like if something happens, right, if you don't have this anymore, people are like, oh, they had $100,000. Like they made this in X amount, they're going to, have all this speculation and stuff. But,
So like, what I kind of pulled
tough
from that was like, I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel like I did great. I just kind of felt like on the fence. And I feel like it is more easy for me to talk about these things with you on this podcast than to just like talk one-on-one with people who I'm not sure how they do feel about finances and money, and talking about things like, even in the corporate world, I would like talk about salary, and there are times where I would ask someone, oh, like, what's your salary? And then I like immediately see the look on their face and like, ah, shit, they are not comfortable with that. And even though I know
right.
I'm okay, I was just like, ah, fuck. So
okay, right,
backtrack real quick.
Yep.
So it's hard identifying who is
before.
okay talking about finances and separating that from their worth and value, because it is separate. And, your finances do not make up your worth and value, but I think it's such a sensitive subject because people do tie that even a bit to, like their worth, or a lot.
Yeah. But isn't that crazy? Because the interesting thing about goal setting and milestones is that when you start a business or you pursue a venture, your friends or family members or anyone who knows you and your inner circles know that you're doing this, ultimately recognize that you are trying to get to some monetary number, some metric. But even in doing that, you still have to downplay or explain what the numbers look like, how they actually work, how they add up, And it's interesting because I think for most people they would see like, oh, Lauren and Brian, they're on track to doing $500,000 a year. Like they're setting out doing what they said they were going to do. Mm-hmm. But you're right. It can be definitely awkward and uncomfortable a little bit. It takes practice. I've gotten a lot more comfortable, quite honestly, sharing some of those numbers because I know the work that's gone into making this happen. Mm-hmm. And I have always operated on the side of, again, keeping it real with whatever the hell's going on. Like, when we hit $1 million, I'm going to share that metric, but I'm going to let people know, yeah, $1 million did not touch this household at all, but we made $1 million. So people can take from that what they want, but I'm definitely going to share that huge accomplishment because I don't think anyone in our families respectively have ever earned $1 million. So that's huge. And maybe they have over their lifetime, maybe, I don't know. I know from my family, no one has. I'm not sure for Marcus's family, but yeah, it's a huge thing. So I'm proud of you guys because you guys hit that $100,000 a quarter goal quick. When was Rodev? And when did they start? When did you guys start in 2019? End of 2019?
So Brian technically started like summer of 2019, and then I joined full time. At the beginning of 2020. So
like a whole year, roughly. Arguably, you might want to say 12 to, I don't know,
18.
You could say 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
$100,000 in that first quarter. That's huge. Especially given the fact that we had a whole damn pandemic.
Yeah, that was terrifying. Just quit my job and then.
Yeah, like, oh, damn. Yeah, that's huge. I think that, I always tell people like 2020 needs an asterisk. Like, can't count this year, right? Like, but that's amazing that you guys were able to do that and that you have your first employee. That, again, even amazing that you guys are able to take home money, okay? Because that's huge. A lot of companies can't do that in the beginning. A lot of business owners can't do that in the beginning. So you guys should be super proud of that accomplishment. Thanks. Because it is worth noting and should not downplay it at all. And it, again, helps you kind of assess where you can end up at the end of 2021. So I'm super excited for you guys.
Thank you so much. And we're not the only ones with a major accomplishment recently.
Yeah. Yeah. So this month, before March 15th hit, we always check to see where our numbers are for the month by like a certain date. And like at the end of the first week of the new month, if we're like past $30,000 in sales, we're like, okay, this is going to be a good month. Mm-hmm. We can kind of, I wouldn't say coast, but we can kind of implement some things and expect to hit a certain number. So last year, March 2020, we were slated to do $50,000 a month in revenue. And that dipped down to about roughly 39,000. And then for the remainder of the year, with April being our lowest grossing month, we recovered and rebounded and stayed within this 35 to 40-ish, $43,000 a month revenue and sales. And we were happy with that because year over year, that was growth. We were sustaining our business despite COVID. And we were super just grateful because it allowed us to focus on things like our margins and other processes. But finally, we broke $50,000. We broke it like end of last week, which is crazy. And based on what we see, we're projected to do close to 60,000. So it's like weird that we have these goals and like you kind of steam past them sometimes. Like our goal is 50,000 and we're rolling right past that.
That is awesome.
Towards 60s. So yeah, we're getting closer to that 83.333.
83.333.
Yeah.
Put that on a mug.
I know. That's a good idea. I can give that to Marcus once we actually hit it. Yeah, so we're super excited about that. It's been crazy busy. We've been flying by the seat of our pants, just trying to make sure we implement. We have so many changes, again, with the transition from contractors to employees. We're transitioning to a different scheduling software. I mean, so many things that we have in the works, and it's like, holy crap, this is our highest grossing month. And we still have, 10 days left, which is insane. But we're super grateful and excited, and it's, you know, from what we've experienced, we've had minor dips, like a couple thousand from the month before, you know, throughout the years, but based on what we've seen, we just expect to continue to grow from here, which is super exciting and nervous and scary and all of those things. But yeah, in addition to that, we got, like I said, we got our employee, we got health benefits. I mean, we're looking to have another employee on board in the next couple of weeks. So, I mean, we're trying to keep this train moving.
Oh, awesome. Congrats. That's amazing. Yeah. That is super exciting.
Thank you.
And I think that, you know, often we talk on this podcast about how entrepreneurship is really hard, because it is. And we talk about the downside and the stress and the judgment and all of that stuff. But these are some of the things where it is so fun. It is so fun to grow. It is so fun to see your numbers go up. It is so exciting to not worry about payroll and where your money's coming from, and that to see you actually have like savings and profit. Like, it, to me, it feels great. It's so worth it. Fills me up with so much joy, because sometimes, you know, you can move the goalposts and you never actually enjoy it, but we enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, we are enjoying it. And like, even like both Marcus and I have been putting in 12, 13, 14-hour days. He's been pushing almost close to 15, 16-hour days as we're going through all of these things and these changes. But we're so happy we're doing this for our business. That is the silver lining. Like, it's directly impacting our household and our future versus someone else's business or company or, you know, whatever. And that is the driving motivation. We get up, we meet at the coffee station, aka our kitchen, Keurig, and we get our day started. And yeah, I mean, it's a great feeling for sure.
Yeah, there are ups and downs, but the ups, like, it feels great, especially when you've worked so hard to see it start to actually pay off. Like, it feels wonderful. Yeah. So I don't always want to talk about how bad it feels. I want to talk about how fucking awesome this feels right now.
Absolutely.
Like, again, we're grateful because we know at any moment it can go sideways so fast. Like, I'm
pretty sure I'm going to jump off this podcast and there's a fire that I'm going to have to tend to. I can guarantee.
Like, I don't take any month for granted, because you can be riding high one month and then your revenue can go down again, like, so quickly. So it feels awesome. We celebrate it, but we're also grateful and cognizant that it is not a guarantee. Nothing is guaranteed, especially entrepreneurship.
These goals and these milestones that we hit, they are part of the journey, and that's how we can enjoy this topsy-turvy situation. But we are, I think you ended on a great note, Lauren. I think we are super happy to be pursuing this, and there's lots of craziness and pains, but there's also a lot of joy in this too. So that wraps up our episode for today. Be sure to like, subscribe, share.
All the things.
Follow
us on Instagram or LinkedIn. And thank you for listening. And thank you, Bridget.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Until next time, guys.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.